And please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. Isla had one of those faces that instantly made you trust her. Big eyes, soft voice, calm energy. Her profile didn't say much, just a short line about working on myself every day. I thought she meant she was into self-improvement or something. Her pictures looked natural, not over-edited like most people's. She seemed normal. She matched with me first and started the conversation right away. She said she liked my steady face, which was a weird compliment, but not the strangest I'd heard. She said I looked reassuring. I asked what that meant, and she said I reminded her of someone important to her. I didn't push it because she said it in a nice way. We met up a few days later at this quiet coffee shop near the park. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands around her cup like she'd been waiting a while. She smiled when she saw me but didn't stand up, just kept staring for a few seconds longer than normal. The first part of the date felt easy. She talked about her work in mental health admin, said she loved the structure of her job, but hated how clinical everything felt. She said she preferred real people over case files. I liked how thoughtful she sounded, like she actually cared about things. But then she started saying things that didn't quite add up. She mentioned that she was in therapy, nothing weird about that, but she said her therapist changed her life. She said he understood her better than anyone ever had. Then she said she'd been working on something called emotional projection therapy, where she tries to transfer her feelings safely. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. Then she smiled and said something that made my stomach drop. She said she purposely dates men who look like her therapist because it helps her practice emotional attachment. She said it calmly, like it was no big deal, like it was a hobby. I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking, but she just smiled at me again and said, "It's working." She explained that she'd been doing this for almost a year. She said she finds people who resemble him in small ways, hair, height, smile, and practices connecting with them so that when she eventually tells her therapist how she feels, she'll be ready. She said I was the closest match yet. I didn't even know how to respond. She said she'd already noticed things we had in common, how I ordered my coffee, how I used my hands when I talked, how I tilted my head when listening. She said they were all things he does too. It was like she was cataloging me. After that, she started asking personal questions, not the normal kind, but really specific ones. How often do I think about the people I care about? Do I tend to comfort or withdraw when someone cries? Have I ever had someone depend on me emotionally? Each time I answered, she hummed quietly, like she was comparing it to something in her head. When I asked about her therapist, she said he didn't know about this project. She said it would ruin the purpose if he found out. She said she wanted to make sure she was good enough for him first. That's when I started realizing it wasn't some quirky psychology experiment. She wasn't practicing. She was rehearsing. When the date ended, she said she'd like to see me again. I hesitated, but she looked genuinely happy, and I didn't want to make things awkward, so I said sure. She smiled, then said, "They'll be proud." That night, she sent me a text saying she'd been thinking about me during her therapy session. She said she almost told him about me but didn't want to break the illusion. She said he'd mentioned progress, that she was learning to trust again, and that made her think of me. It creeped me out, but I didn't reply. The next day, I woke up to a message from her saying she'd sent me something. It was a photo of a journal page covered in neat handwriting. It looked like therapy notes. At the top, it said, "Session 47, transfer successful." Underneath were paragraphs describing me, my expressions, my posture, my tone. She'd written things like, "He listens like him. The warmth is familiar. Progress accelerating." I blocked her number after that. 3 days later, I got an email from a new address. The subject said, "Missed session." It was just a paragraph that said she felt regressed since I stopped talking to her. She said avoiding her was like abandoning the child mid-treatment. Then she said she found another picture of her therapist online and attached it. I opened it. He looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough that it made sense. Same hair color, same build, similar eyes. The resemblance was eerie. I deleted the email and reported the address, but a week later, another message came. It was shorter this time. "He's proud of us." After that, I started seeing weird things online. Someone made a fake profile using my photos, same first name, same city, but the bio said, attachment in progress. I reported it, but it kept coming back under slightly different usernames. Then one day, a friend sent me a link to a forum post titled Therapy Reflections. The author was named Isla. The post talked about using mirrored figures to rebuild trust. She wrote about a man she called Subject 10, describing his face in detail. My face. She wrote that the integration is nearly complete. It had dozens of comments from strangers praising her for her method. Some even asked if they could try it. I tried finding her again, but all her accounts were gone. A month passed, and I'd nearly forgotten about it until one morning when I went to get coffee before work. The barista handed me my drink and said someone had already paid for it. She handed me the receipt, and in the notes section, it said, "You're doing great in therapy." I looked around, but no one stood out. That night, I checked my email again, and there was one new message. It had no subject, no name, just an attachment. It was a video clip. In the video, Isla was sitting in a small room facing the camera. The lighting was soft, the walls were blank. She looked calm, almost peaceful. She said, "I'm ready now." Then she turned her head slightly, and behind her, taped to the wall, were photos. My photos. She smiled at the camera and said, "Thank you for helping me heal." That was the last time I ever heard from her. But sometimes when I'm on dating apps now, I'll see profiles of women who look familiar. Same calm eyes, same phrasing in their bios. One even had the line, "working on emotional attachment." I swiped left immediately, but the next day, I got a message from a new account. It said, "You remind me of someone." Ryan didn't seem like the kind of guy who caused problems. His profile was simple. Photos normal, smile casual, bio short. It just said, "looking for something real." That was it. No quotes, no cringe jokes. He looked like someone who worked out but didn't brag about it. I matched with him on a quiet Sunday night when I was half bored, half curious. We started talking, and he was surprisingly easy to chat with. He replied fast, not in a desperate way, just consistent. He asked the usual stuff. What I do, where I'm from, favorite food. He mentioned he lived nearby and preferred local matches because it keeps things simple. We planned to meet the next Friday. Nothing big, just drinks at a quiet bar downtown. The day came and he showed up exactly on time. He looked the same as his photos, but even better. Relaxed, confident, calm. The conversation started light. He was charming in that subtle, practiced way, like he'd done this before but still made it feel genuine. Halfway through, he said something that froze me. He mentioned he'd matched with my sister too. At first, I thought he met someone with the same name or maybe a random coincidence, but he said her name. My actual sister's name. He said they chatted for a few days before he realized we were related. He said they compared our profiles and had a laugh about how similar we were. I didn't know what to say. He said it so casually, like it wasn't a big deal, like comparing two sisters on a dating app was normal. I asked how he even figured it out, and he said he noticed her last name on one of her photos. It was in the corner of a birthday banner in her picture. Then he found mine and realized it matched. He said they talked about it and decided it wasn't weird because it's all just part of the algorithm. He laughed after saying that. I didn't. He told me they joked about who he should go out with, and apparently my sister told him to pick me. He said she thought I'd be more his type. That made me feel sick. I couldn't stop thinking about him and my sister messaging back and forth, discussing me like some choice on a menu. I asked what else they talked about, and he said not much, just comparing notes. He said she had more selfies, and I had better captions. He actually said that. The rest of the date was tense. He didn't seem to notice. He kept steering the conversation back to random stuff. Music, food, places to visit. But every time he smiled, I couldn't stop wondering what exactly he'd said to her. When I got home, I texted my sister right away. She replied with one message. "Oh my God, you ma'am." That's when I realized she wasn't joking. She said they had matched about 2 weeks before me. She thought he was funny but a bit off. She said he was weirdly interested in details, like what our parents did, where we grew up, what street we used to live on. She said she got creeped out and stopped replying. Then a few days later, she saw me match with someone who looked familiar. She said she recognized his face, but didn't say anything because she wasn't sure. That night, I went back through his profile and noticed something small. He liked one of my older pictures that I had posted months ago, a family barbecue one. In the corner, blurred but visible, was my sister. I had matched him that night. The next day, I woke up to a new match. Same photo, different name. The bio was blank this time. I knew it was him immediately. The eyes were the same. I blocked him again, but he made another account the next day. This one used one of my own pictures as his profile photo. He captioned it, "Guess which one's real." That's when I told my sister everything. She checked her messages again and found something she hadn't noticed before. In one of their old conversations, he'd sent a screenshot of my Instagram account. Not a link, an actual cropped screenshot. He'd said something like, "You two are nearly identical. Same lighting, same angles." We reported his accounts, but they kept disappearing before the reports went through. A week later, my sister got a message from a new number. It said, "You picked wrong." That night, I got one too. You took her place. I tried to brush it off as someone trying to scare us, but then a photo came through. It was from that same barbecue years ago, the same one for my dating profile, but zoomed in on my sister's face this time. The next day, I noticed someone new was viewing my stories every time I posted. The username was random letters, but the profile picture was a blurry shot of our childhood street. I stopped posting for a while, but then my sister called one night panicking. Someone had sent her a video of herself walking home from work. It was taken from a distance, shaky, like through a car window. The message attached said, "Still deciding." We went to the police together. They said the messages could be traced if we could get the number, but they never found anything. Whoever it was kept switching numbers and accounts. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I got a notification that someone had logged into my dating app from another device. When I opened it, my profile picture was gone, replaced with one of my sister. Same bio, same captions, same photos of our family, except swapped. I deleted my account completely. My sister did the same. For a while, it stopped. No messages, no accounts, nothing. Then a month later, she texted me saying she'd seen his face again, this time on a mutual friend's dating app. Same photos, same eyes, but a new name. I didn't believe her until she sent me a screenshot. He was still using one of my old pictures, just cropped differently, as if testing what would pass. She reported it immediately, but the account disappeared before she could show anyone else. Now, neither of us use dating apps. We even changed our social media names. But sometimes we'll still get random follow requests from accounts with usernames that look like codes, numbers, and initials. The most recent one had a bio that said, "Still comparing." Brooke looked like every influencer you've ever scrolled past. Perfect lighting, coffee in hand, effortless poses in random streets that looked staged but natural at the same time. Her profile said she was a content strategist, which sounded fake but harmless. Her messages were quick and full of emojis, like she typed with one hand while filming with the other. We matched late one night, and she replied instantly. She said she'd already seen me around online, which confused me since I barely post anything. I figured she meant I looked familiar or something. She asked if I wanted to meet for brunch instead of dinner because morning light was better. I thought she meant she liked sunlight. Later, I realized she meant lighting for her phone. The cafe she picked was one of those aesthetic spots that looks like it was built for Instagram. White tiles, hanging plants, neon quotes on the wall. I got there early, but she was already there, sitting near the window with a camera on a small tripod aimed at herself. She waved without looking away from the lens. She had 3 phones laid out on the table. One recording, one open on a notes app, and one connected to some kind of timer. I sat down, and she told me she was finishing a segment. When she finally looked at me properly, she smiled wide, too wide, and said I had the right look. I laughed awkwardly, asked what she meant, and she said I had a face that fit the background. She talked nonstop about her content. She said she ran multiple pages, lifestyle, wellness, dating, and something called the Single Girl Diaries. She said it performed best when her followers thought she was single. Then she leaned in and asked how I feel about being a background boyfriend. At first, I thought it was a joke, but she started explaining it like a business deal. She said she needed someone real but not public, someone she could date off camera while maintaining her single image online. She said her followers got bored whenever she posted about relationships. She said this way, she could keep her engagement numbers high while still having someone for private moments. I didn't know what to say. The idea made no sense, but she kept talking like it was the most logical thing ever. She said she'd done it before, but the last guy got emotional and tried to go public. Then she started listing rules. I couldn't post her, couldn't tag her, couldn't even mention her name online. She said I could text her, but only during specific hours when she wasn't filming. She said she'd prefer if I didn't tell anyone we were seeing each other until the narrative settles. She even had it written out, actual printed pages that she slid across the table. It looked like a contract. She said she made everyone sign one before things got serious, so boundaries were clear. I didn't sign anything, obviously. I told her it was too weird, but she didn't seem offended. She said I didn't need to decide right away. Then she asked if I'd mind helping her with something small to see how we worked together. Before I could answer, she moved her tripod so that the camera faced both of us. She said she needed to film reaction shots. She wanted footage of us laughing, drinking coffee, pretending to talk. She said it was for a montage about finding love after heartbreak. I told her I wasn't comfortable being on camera, but she said it wouldn't be obvious. It would just be background material. After that, she pulled out her phone and started recording anyway. She asked me to look natural. Then she asked me to hold her hand for a few seconds so she could capture connection. It felt like being in someone else's movie. People around us were staring. She didn't care. She adjusted angles, changed seats, and whispered to herself about lighting. After an hour, she said she had enough footage and thanked me like I'd done her a favor. She said she'd blur me out before posting. The next day, I saw the video. It wasn't blurred. She uploaded it to her page with the caption, "You never know who's watching." The comments were full of speculation, people asking who I was, if she had a secret boyfriend, if this was part of her Mystery Man series. She hadn't tagged me, though my face was clear as day. I messaged her telling her to take it down, but she didn't reply. Later that night, she posted a story saying, "When they can't handle the attention," followed by a crying, laughing emoji. The following morning, my inbox was flooded. People found me somehow. DMs from strangers asking if I was the guy. Some were friendly, others creepy. One person said they'd seen me in her other videos. That part didn't make sense, until I checked. In her older clips, there were quick glimpses of men in the background. Different guys each time, all blurred just enough to be anonymous but still visible. In some, you would hear faint voices under the music, male voices, just long enough to sound real. I started realizing how many background boyfriends she'd had. I tried reporting the post, but it didn't get taken down. Then a few days later, she uploaded another video, this one darker. It was a slideshow of failed connections, with text like, "Some people can't handle being part of your story." At the end, there was a blurred picture of me walking away from the cafe. The caption said, "He didn't understand the role." After that, I started seeing her videos everywhere. The algorithm pushed them into my feed on different apps. Every time, there'd be some new clip that made it look like I was part of an ongoing series. My name started getting tagged by random fan accounts speculating about the real guy behind the videos. Then it got worse. Someone slid a note under my door that said, "She told us everything." No name, no explanation. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop, unknown numbers, video call attempts, messages saying things like, "You broke her heart, and she deserved better." I went to her page again, and she'd uploaded a new video titled "The One Who Quit." It was a compilation of short clips of her crying, walking down streets alone, and ending with a single photo of me looking over my shoulder, taken from across a cafe. I hadn't seen anyone take that photo. I blocked her again, deleted my socials, and changed my number. A week later, a package showed up at my apartment. No return label, just a small box with a USB drive inside. Against my better judgment, I plugged it in. There was one file, background footage. It was every clip she'd ever taken of me. At the cafe, walking to my car, standing in a crosswalk, even one of me leaving my building days later. Each one labeled with a date and time. At the end, there was one last video. It was filmed from outside my apartment window. She was standing across the street, smiling, whispering something into the camera. I couldn't hear the words clearly, but I replayed it until I made it out. She said, "Every story needs an ending." That was 2 months ago. I moved since then, but sometimes I still get new accounts following me, fake names, no posts, all with bios that say things like, Season 2 coming soon. Noah wasn't the kind of guy who wasted words. His profile was clean. No quotes, no deep thoughts, just one sentence. Efficiency is everything. I thought it was weird but kind of funny, like he was being ironic. His pictures were all neutral too. Plain backgrounds, casual clothes, serious expression in every shot. No friends, no travel photos, just him. He messaged me first and went straight into logistics. He didn't flirt or compliment me. He asked what days I was free, what part of town I lived in, and how far I was willing to travel for a first meeting. It felt like booking a haircut more than planning a date. Still, I said yes because curiosity got the better of me. He suggested a small cafe on a Thursday afternoon. I figured it was casual enough that if it was awkward, I could leave early. When I got there, he was already waiting. Not on his phone, not looking around, just sitting perfectly upright with a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. He stood when I walked over, checked his watch, and said something about being right on schedule. The conversation started normal. He asked about work, hobbies, the usual. But every time I gave an answer, he'd nod like he was filing it away in his head. There was this mechanical rhythm to the whole thing. Question, answer, short silence, next question. About 15 minutes in, he casually mentioned that I was his 10th date that week. I laughed, thinking he was exaggerating. But he said no, literally 10. He said he books each 1-2 hours apart to maximize efficiency. He said he treats dating like data collection. He meets everyone, observes, compares, and then filters based on compatibility. He said it's faster to learn in person than through texting. He even has a spreadsheet on his phone. He showed it to me. It listed names, times, and notes like quiet, talkative, asks too many questions. Mine was already there next to my name, with on time typed beside it. I didn't even know what to say. He talked about it so casually, like it was totally normal. He said most people waste too much time talking to one person before finding out they're incompatible. He said he preferred volume over chance. Then he looked at his watch and said we had 1 hour and 20 minutes left. It wasn't a joke. After that, I started paying more attention. Every time I glanced around, he was checking the clock or adjusting something on his phone. I noticed he didn't touch his drink once. He didn't even seem like he wanted to be there, more like he was studying me. When I tried to ask him about his job or family, he answered in quick, empty sentences and then pivoted back to questions about me. It felt like he was running through a list. Halfway through, he excused himself to reset his focus. He walked outside for 2 minutes, then came back and said he does that between every day to keep things mentally separate. That's when I realized the bag he carried wasn't just a laptop bag. It was full of folders. He kept them neatly arranged, each labeled with what looked like initials. I saw one sticking out that said EM 12 p.m. Mine must have been next in line. AS 2 p.m. I told him that sounded exhausting, and he said it wasn't. He said he'd been doing it for months. He said he never sees the same person twice unless their data score meets a threshold he set. He said only one person had ever made it to a second meeting. I asked what happened to her, and he said she stopped cooperating. He said it calmly, without emotion, like he was reading it from a file. Then he added, you can't get useful results when someone changes variables mid-process. I wanted to leave right then, but he said my exit decision point wasn't until the last 15 minutes. It was so specific that it made me freeze. I looked around the cafe, trying to figure out if anyone else was noticing how strange this was. But no one was. It was just us in the corner, him watching me be pretending to be normal while my heart started racing. I stood up, said I needed the bathroom, and walked straight out the back door. When I got home, I blocked his number and deleted the app. But a few hours later, I got a text from a different number. It said, session ended early. Data incomplete. Then another, rescheduling not recommended, variable unstable. I ignored them, but the next morning, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, results summary. The message was short, just a table of scores. Punctuality, 9/10. Honesty, 8/10. Emotional compliance, 3/10. Overall efficiency match, 57%. At the bottom it said, thank you for participating. I tried to forget about it, but a week later I started noticing weird things online. On a dating advice forum, someone had posted screenshots of what looked like his spreadsheet. It had dozens of names and initials. Each one had timestamps, ratings, and comments like good posture, hesitant tone, potential follow-up. My initials were there too, next to the words unreliable timeline. The post got deleted within an hour. Then, about a month later, I was leaving work when I noticed a man sitting in a parked car near the exit. The car lights were off, but I could see someone inside on a laptop. I didn't think much of it until my phone buzzed. It was another text. No name, just a number. It said, "Data verification in progress. Please remain consistent." After that, I started seeing the same car near my building every few days. Always the same make and color, always the same spot. Eventually, I stopped getting the messages. But then, out of nowhere, a package arrived at my place. No return address. Inside was a printed report. The title said, "Compatibility finalized." Underneath, it was a detailed summary of our 2-hour meeting. Everything from what I ordered to how long I maintained eye contact. They even included my heart rate estimation based on observable pulse changes. The last line said, "Result logged. Replacement scheduled." That was the part that made my stomach drop. Because a week later, a friend of mine messaged me saying she matched with a guy named Noah who seemed weirdly organized and wanted to meet for coffee. She sent me a picture. Same man, same bag, same expression. I told her not to go. She didn't reply for hours. When she finally did, she said she went anyway and that it wasn't bad, just strange. She said he kept checking his watch. 2 days later, she texted me again and said he asked to meet her for a second phase. I never heard from her after that. Now, whenever I walk past that cafe, I can't help but wonder how many people he's still scheduling. How many names are still being added to that list? And if somewhere on his laptop, there's a new column next to my name marked complete. I matched with Shlo on a Tuesday night when I was half asleep, scrolling without thinking. Her profile stood out because it was so organized. Every photo looked like it had been arranged to show something specific. Her dog, her kitchen, her bookshelf, her morning jog. Even her bio was written like a checklist. Independent, punctual, direct communicator, no time for guesswork. She messaged me first, which I liked, but the first thing she asked wasn't small talk. She asked what time I usually wake up and if I consider myself structured or spontaneous. I said I didn't know, probably somewhere in between. She replied instantly, saying that was a Category 3 response. I had no idea what that meant, but she said she'd explain when we met. We planned a date for the next day at a small cafe near the city center. I showed up early, grabbed a seat, and ordered a coffee. When she walked in, she was carrying a big tote bag full of papers and folders. Not a normal purse, an actual office-style document bag. She looked neat, serious, and completely unbothered by how much attention she got walking in like that. She smiled politely, sat down, and started unpacking her bag. Out came a stack of printed charts, clipboards, and pens. She spread them across the table like we were about to start an interview. She said she believed in data-based relationships. She said she'd been working on her own compatibility system for months. It used personality types, star signs, attachment styles, and something she called response prediction scores. She said dating apps were unreliable because people don't provide measurable input. Before I could say anything, she pulled out one sheet and started marking it with a pen. The questions began simple. What do I do for work? How often do I travel? What kind of food do I like? Each time I answered, she glanced down and crossed something off. After 10 minutes, the questions got stranger. She asked how I'd react if someone ignored me for a full day. She asked what kind of apology I considered sincere. She asked how I felt about sharing location data in relationships. Every few minutes, she'd pause, look at her papers, and mumble numbers to herself. At one point, I noticed she had multiple charts stacked on top of each other, each labeled with a different name, male first names written in neat handwriting. My name was at the top of one. When I asked if those were from previous dates, she said yes. She said she kept records of everyone she met because it's the only way to see patterns. I laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe she was just eccentric, but she wasn't joking. She said she compares each person's data every few months to track relational outcomes. Halfway through, she flipped to a fresh page labeled Long-Term Viability. She started asking personal questions. How close I am to my family, if I want kids, if I've ever cheated, and how much time I spend alone. Whenever I hesitated, she made a note like she was docking points. Then she asked for my birthday. I told her and she immediately wrote something down, then pulled out another sheet with pre-printed zodiac signs and percentages. She circled a few boxes and said, "That explains your reaction pattern." She kept saying things like reaction pattern and adjustment index, like we were in a study. At one point, I noticed a small device on the table next to her pen. It looked like a recorder. When I asked what it was, she said she records all first meetings to review tone accuracy. She said she listens back later to analyze verbal consistency. By that point, the waitress came over to take our order, and Chloe didn't even look up. She said she doesn't eat during evaluations because it interferes with data processing. When the waitress left, Chloe leaned forward and said I was doing better than expected. She said I ranked high on something called the adaptability scale. Then she asked if I'd be comfortable completing a short written section. She slid a sheet across the table, an actual multiple choice questionnaire. I skimmed through it. It had questions like, how often do you forgive people easily? And if someone cried in front of you, what would your first instinct be? There were even boxes to tick for emotional reactions: calm, neutral, defensive, withdrawn. I didn't fill it out. I told her I thought it was a bit much. She didn't get mad, but she definitely didn't like that answer. She said refusal responses usually indicate low compliance potential. Then she wrote something on her clipboard in red pen. I decided to end the date early. I told her I had to meet a friend and stood up to leave. She didn't try to stop me, just smiled and said, "That'll be marked under early termination." When I got home that night, I texted my friend about it, laughing at how weird it was. But the next day, I started getting notifications on social media, new accounts following me. The usernames all had numbers in them, like profile_04 and subject_19. It didn't have pictures, but one of them liked an old post of mine within seconds of following. Then I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject said, "Preliminary results." Inside was a table labeled compatibility outcome, Chloe and my name. It had categories like emotional stability, predictive behavior, and potential deviation risk. Some were highlighted in red with notes beside them. One said, moderate resistance to guidance. Another said, control variable, uncertain. I deleted it and blocked the address, but another email came a few hours later with a subject line, revision 2. That one just said, further observation required. Over the next week, I started noticing strange things. One night, I got a friend request from someone with my exact same profile picture, same name, same age, but the bio said, compatibility 92%. It disappeared a few hours later. Another time, I got a text from a random number saying, "You scored higher this time. Thank you for your cooperation." I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No stamp, no address. Inside was one of her printed charts, the same kind she'd used on the date. It had my name at the top, circled, and at the bottom was a handwritten note that said, "Reassessment complete. Final phase pending." That was the last I ever heard from her directly, but not the last time she appeared. Months later, while scrolling through a dating app, I saw a familiar photo, Chloe smiling, but her bio was different this time. It said, "Research complete. Seeking final validation." When I clicked her profile, it refreshed and disappeared. A few days after that, I got another email from a new address. It said only one line, "You fit perfectly on paper." I stopped using dating apps after that, but sometimes when I check my junk mail, I'll see auto-deleted messages with subjects like follow-up evaluation or compatibility progress updated. I don't open them anymore. The part of me wonders how many other people's names are on our charts, and which one of them she decided was perfect enough to keep. Adam's profile looked normal, the kind that doesn't set off alarms. He was mid-30s, clean photos, nothing flashy. His bio said he was a proud dad who believes in honesty, which sounded sweet. Most people who mention their kids on dating apps seem open and responsible, so I didn't think twice. He messaged first polite and steady. No corny pickup lines. Just simple conversation about work and food and what kind of movies we liked. He mentioned his daughter once during our chat, saying she was a big part of his life. That seemed fine. I figured it meant he was involved, which honestly is rare. After a week of texting, he suggested dinner. He picked a casual restaurant near the pier, somewhere bright, public, nothing that screamed red flag. I got there first. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, not too busy. When he arrived, I noticed right away he wasn't alone. Beside him was a teenage girl, maybe 15 or 16, with the same eyes and serious expression. I assumed he was dropping her off somewhere and we'd say hi quickly before she left. But she followed him all the way to the table. He smiled and introduced her immediately. He said she was his daughter and she'd be joining us. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but she sat down, took out her phone, and started scrolling like it was completely normal. Then he said she had to approve anyone he meets. I thought maybe he was being protective and would send her home after a few minutes, but she stayed. The first 20 minutes were painfully awkward. Adam acted totally relaxed, talking about work and music while his daughter sat silently, staring at me between glances at her screen. Whenever I tried to make conversation with her, she gave short answers, one-word replies, or just shrugged. It started feeling less like a date and more like an interview. Every time I said something, Adam would look at her as if checking for a reaction. When she smiled slightly, he seemed pleased. When she didn't, he'd subtly steer the topic in another direction. At one point, the waitress came to take our order, and the daughter ordered for all three of us without asking what we wanted. She listed exactly what she and her dad usually got. Same drinks, same meal. Adam thanked her like it was routine. When the food came, she put her phone down and started asking questions, finally speaking more than a few words. They weren't normal questions, though. She asked how many relationships I'd had, if I'd ever cheated, if I believed in marriage, and how long it took me to get bored of people. Her tone wasn't mean, just disturbingly serious. I looked at Adam, expecting him to stop her, but he just smiled faintly and said she was good at spotting character flaws. I laughed it off, saying she'd make a great detective someday. She didn't laugh. She said, "I already find out what people hide." After that, the air went cold. I stopped eating. Adam didn't seem to notice how weird it had gotten. He leaned back and told me he trusted his daughter's judgment more than his own. He said she'd never been wrong. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, "Not since Mom." He changed the subject immediately after that. By the end of dinner, I was just trying to figure out how to leave politely. The daughter checked her phone again, then leaned toward her dad and whispered something. He nodded, then turned to me and said, "She thinks you're a good one." It sounded like approval, but the way he said it made me feel trapped, like I just passed some kind of test I didn't even know I was taking. He asked if I wanted to go for a walk on the pier with them. Not him and me, them. I said I was tired, that I had work early. He insisted it would just be for a few minutes, but the daughter was already standing, waiting. So I went. The pier was mostly empty except for a few couples and street performers. They walked slightly ahead of me, talking softly. Every now and then, the daughter would turn around to check if I was keeping up. At one point, she stopped, took a photo of the three of us with her phone, and said she liked to document important moments. I wasn't even sure she asked permission. When we got to the end of the pier, she looked out at the water and told her dad she won't leave. He smiled, said she got a good feeling about me. Then he looked at me and said I was different from the others. I left after that, pretending I got a call. They didn't argue, just watched me go. That night, I blocked his number. The next morning, I had a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of the three of us from the pier, the one the daughter took. The message said, "She still approves." I deleted it immediately and didn't respond. 2 days later, another message came, this time with a video. It was security footage from outside the restaurant where we met. The angle was from the parking lot, showing me walking to my car while Adam and his daughter stood by their car watching me drive away. The message underneath said, "We always check who's safe." I went to the police, showed them everything, but they said it wasn't enough to classify as a threat. They said maybe it was a misunderstanding. A week passed without contact. Then one evening, I found an envelope under my door. Inside was a printed photo, me leaving my building that morning. On the back, written in neat handwriting, it said, "Still approved." I started staying in a friend's place after that. It went quiet again for a while, until one night when I checked my dating app out of habit. I hadn't deleted it yet. When I opened it, a new profile popped up immediately. It was the daughter. Different name, but same face. Her bio said, "I protect the ones who stay." I reported it, blocked it, deleted the ad completely. A few days later, another envelope showed up at my friend's house. This time, inside was a drawing. Pencil sketch, rough lines. It showed 3 people sitting at a table, me, Adam, and his daughter. The caption underneath said, "Family approved." That was the last thing I ever got from them. I moved a month later, changed my number, even stopped using social media for a while. But every once in a while, when I go out to eat, I'll see families sitting together at nearby tables. Sometimes there'll be a teenage girl quietly watching, her phone face down, eyes focused on whoever's sitting across from her. I always wonder if one of them is still running tests for him. I met Jenna on Hinge on a random Thursday night when I wasn't even planning to talk to anyone. Her profile looked harmless, simple photos, nice smile, nothing overly done. She wrote that she liked hiking, dogs, and building people back up. I thought that last part sounded kind of deep, like maybe she'd been through something. I swiped right without thinking much. She messaged me first within minutes. She wasn't flirty or awkward, just confident in a way that made it easy to talk. She said she'd been single for a while because she had standards now. I didn't ask what that meant, but she told me anyway. She said she didn't date just anyone, only people who reminded her of her ex. It sounded like a joke, so I laughed, but she didn't. She said she meant it literally. She said she looks for people who act, talk, and dress like her ex so she can train them not to leave. That should have been enough for me to delete the chat, but I thought maybe she was being dramatic or self-aware in a dark humor kind of way. She said she wanted to meet the next day, and I said sure. We met at this small rooftop bar she picked. When I got there, she was already waiting, sitting in the corner, staring at the skyline like she'd been rehearsing something. She looked exactly like her pictures, but there was something slightly intense about her eyes. Not in a dangerous way, more like she was focused too hard on me, like she was already evaluating something before I even said hello. She complimented my jacket first, said it was his style. I asked what she meant, and she said her ex had one just like it. Then she smiled and said that was a good sign. The whole date was weirdly controlled. She directed everything, where I should sit, what I should order, even how I held my drink. Every time I did something she liked, she'd say, "See, that's how we should have been." If I laughed or changed the subject, she'd watch me like she was studying my reaction. At one point, I joked that she must really miss her ex, and she said she didn't. She said she was over him, but wanted to make sure the next person wouldn't make the same mistakes he did. Then she said, "That's why I trained them." I tried to make light of it, but she didn't laugh. She said the first guy she dated after her ex didn't learn properly. She said he got impatient, so she had to start over. I didn't understand what that meant and didn't ask because her tone made me uncomfortable. After about an hour, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She said she liked to keep track of things. Then she flipped it open and started writing something while glancing at me. I asked if she was making notes about the date, and she said yes. She said she liked to keep records to measure progress. When I asked progress toward what, she said, "Getting it right this time." She then told me more about her ex, how he left her suddenly after 3 years, how he took her peace with him, and how she'd been rebuilding it ever since. She said most people move on wrong. She said she does it right, by finding someone similar and fixing what went wrong through them. At that point, I was just nodding along, pretending to check my phone for something, trying to plan my exit. She noticed. She said she didn't like when people got distracted, and that it was one of his problems too. When the check came, she didn't even glance at it. She said she'd already told the bartender to put it under her tab. She said she always pays because she doesn't want anyone thinking they can owe her and then disappear. I thanked her before I could stand. She said she wanted to show me something. She opened her phone and scrolled through a gallery that made my stomach twist. It was full of photos, men, dozens of them, different faces, but all with the same style. Same haircut, same beard length, same clothes. And in some of the photos, I realized they were taken from weird angles, like she wasn't supposed to be taking them. She said these were past attempts. She said some failed early, some made it longer, but none of them stayed. She said I fit the pattern better than most. I told her I had to go, but she said she'd walk me out. I didn't want to make it weird, so I let her. When we got outside, she asked if I was seeing anyone else. I said no, just to get it over with. She smiled like I'd given the right answer. Then she said, "Don't worry, I'll make sure you stay this time." I left quickly after that and blocked her number the moment I got home. 2 days later, I got a message from a new number. It said, "You don't have to pretend. I know it scared you, but it's just the process." I didn't reply. Then another message came, "You're further than most. Don't ruin that." The next day, I found an envelope under my door. Inside was a photo of me leaving my building, taken from across the street. On the back it said, "See, you already look better when you're following directions." I went to the police, but they couldn't do much. They said since there was no direct threat, all I could do was file a report. That night, I checked her profile again out of paranoia. It was gone, completely deleted. For a few days, everything was quiet. Then I started getting friend requests from random accounts, each one with profile pictures of men who looked eerily like me. Same haircut, same clothes, same smile. The final thing that happened was a package arriving at my work. No return label. Inside was a small notebook identical to the one she'd used on the date. It had my name written on the first page. The rest was blank, except for one line at the bottom, starting again. I don't know if she's still out there or if she moved on to someone else who fits the pattern. But sometimes when I check my social media, I see new accounts pop up in my followers, always private, always with no posts. The usernames are random, but one of them used my birthday in the numbers. I deleted my accounts a week later. Still, every now and then I get emails from addresses I don't recognize with the subject line "Progress Update." None of them have text, just attachments I never open. Tyler messaged me first. His profile was basic, plain pictures, no filters, a short bio that said he liked honest people. He wasn't my usual type, but he seemed normal enough. His texts were polite, nothing over the top. He asked to meet in person after a few days of chatting, and I agreed because honestly, I was tired of endless small talk. He suggested a local coffee shop I knew pretty well, a kind that always smelled like vanilla and espresso, and had students typing away at laptops in every corner. We planned to meet there on a Sunday afternoon. He was already sitting at a corner table when I walked in. Clean cut, simple clothes, phone face down beside a half-empty cup. He smiled when he saw me, but it was one of those smiles that didn't reach his eyes. Still, I told myself to stop overanalyzing. The first 10 minutes were fine. He asked standard questions, what I did for work, where I was from, how long I've been using dating apps. He didn't talk too much about himself, though. Every time I asked about his job or hobbies, he'd answer quickly and shift the topic back to me. About 20 minutes in, something odd caught my attention. A small red light blinking faintly from what looked like a black pen on the table. I didn't think much of it until I leaned closer and noticed it wasn't a pen. It was a small recording device, the kind journalists use for interviews. Before I could even ask, he said it out loud. He said he records all of his dates. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He said he records every single one in case anyone accuses him of anything. He said it like it was a normal precaution, like everyone just walked around with a recorder ready to capture their conversations. I froze for a second, not sure how to respond. He said it was for his safety, that you never know how people might twist things. He said women have ruined men's lives by lying, and that he refuses to be one of those statistics. He leaned back calmly, waiting for me to say something. I told him that was invasive, and he said it wasn't. It was protective. He said he'd been recording since the moment I sat down. After that, I couldn't even focus. Every word I said felt heavy. I started wondering how much he recorded before even telling me. The background noise of the cafe suddenly felt too loud, like every sound was being captured and stored somewhere. He must have sensed my discomfort because he smiled again, the same fake one from before, and said I had nothing to worry about as long as I was genuine. I wanted to leave, but something about how calmly he said it made me feel stuck. Like if I left too suddenly, it would be recorded as aggressive or emotional or whatever narrative he'd already decided to build. He went on to explain how he kept every file organized by name and date. He said he even had backups in case something happened to the original. When I asked what he meant by something happened, he said sometimes people disappear from the apps, and he liked to keep records of the ones that mattered. I paid for my drink just to have an excuse to stand up, but he followed me to the counter. While I waited, I noticed another small device clipped to his jacket pocket, another red light blinking slowly. I told him I had to leave because of an appointment. He nodded, didn't argue, just said he'd saved this one as completed. That phrase stuck with me. Completed. Like I was a task on a checklist. When I got outside, I turned around and saw him still sitting there, not leaving, just replaying something on his phone with his earbuds in. That night, I got a message from him saying it was a nice session. Session, not date. Then he added, "You spoke clearly, by the way. Good audio quality." I blocked him immediately. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, how he had backups, how he stored everything by name. I wondered if he'd already saved mine somewhere. 2 days later, I got an email from an unknown address. The subject line said, "Transparency." Inside was a single link to a Google Drive folder. I didn't want to open it, but I did. The folder had recordings labeled with first names and dates, dozens of them, all recent. One of them had my name. I clicked it. It was our entire conversation from the cafe, start to finish. I could hear the clinking of cups, my laugh, even the sound of my phone buzzing in my bag. The audio was disturbingly clear. But what really made me sick was the folder next to mine. It was labeled Notes. I opened it, and it had typed summaries of each recording. Not just what people said, how they acted, what they wore, how much eye contact they made. Next to my name, it said, "Composed. Slight discomfort after reveal. Follow-up required." That last part, follow-up required, sent chills down my spine. I went to the police with everything, the email, the folder link, his messages. But they said unless he threatened me directly, there wasn't much they could do. They said recording in a public place without consent was a gray area. The next morning, the folder was gone. The link said, "File deleted by owner." A week passed before anything else happened. Then I started getting calls from unknown numbers, all short, all silent. Sometimes I'd answer and hear faint background noise, like cafe chatter or footsteps. Once, someone breathed into the receiver and hung up. Then came the emails. Different accounts each time, all with subject lines like feedback or evaluation. They didn't contain messages, just attachments. Audio files. When I played one, it was a recording of my voice from that day, repeating a sentence I'd said during the date. Only it was looped over and over. After the third one, I changed my number and deleted all my emails. But 2 months later, a USB drive showed up in my mailbox with no note, no address. I didn't plug it in, but curiosity got to me eventually. When I opened it, there was a single audio file titled Final Record. It started with static, then a familiar sound, the cafe, my voice again, but this time I wasn't speaking from across the table. It sounded closer, like someone was standing right next to me breathing. The recording went silent for a few seconds, and then a man's voice, Tyler's voice, said quietly, "It's important to document everything." The file ended there. I moved cities after that. I deleted all my social media, even changed my name on the dating apps. But sometimes late at night, my phone will start recording on its own. I'll see the red light flicker for a second before it stops. I don't know if it's a glitch or if he's still documenting. Lily's profile looked too normal for someone who'd end up being that strange. Her pictures were simple, outdoorsy shots, a black hoodie, brown hair tied back. Her bio said, "I'm private, not mysterious," which at the time sounded kind of cool. She didn't use emojis, didn't post her job, and when I asked what she did, she said she worked in transitions. I thought she meant HR or something. We started talking and she was polite but short. She never shared much about herself, but she asked a lot about me, what area I live in, what my usual hangout spots were, whether I had any hobbies that involved public places. It was a weird question, but I told her I liked going to caves, bars, and cinemas. She said she couldn't do any of those. When I asked why, she said she was in witness protection. I didn't believe her at first. She said it in such a casual way, like she was talking about moving apartments. She said she couldn't be in places with cameras or public records because it could compromise her location. She said meeting me would be fine as long as I followed her rules. I thought it was ridiculous, but she didn't seem crazy, cautious. I figured maybe she had a bad breakup or was exaggerating to make herself sound mysterious, so I agreed to meet. She picked the place, a tiny diner off the main road that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The kind of place that only took cash and still used laminated menus. When I walked in, she was already sitting at a corner booth with her hood up. I waved, and she nodded without smiling. The first thing she said was that she liked the place because there were no cameras inside. She pointed at the ceiling like she checked already. She said she'd been there before and knew the owner. It was awkward at first. She kept her phone off and wouldn't let me take mine out. She said phones made her anxious because she didn't know who might be connected. I didn't even argue. I just kept it face down on the table. She didn't eat much, just stirred her coffee while asking questions. Some were normal, what I did for work, how long I had been on the app. But some were strange. She asked if I'd ever felt watched. She asked if I knew how to spot hidden cameras. She even asked if I'd ever had dreams that matched things happening in real life. I tried to laugh it off, but she wasn't joking. She said people underestimate how many eyes are around. She said witness protection wasn't about hiding from one person. It was about staying invisible from everyone. Halfway through the meal, she asked if I could drive her somewhere after. I said maybe, depending on where. She said she'd show me once we left. I said I couldn't because I had plans later, but she didn't look disappointed. She just said, "You'll change your mind eventually." That line stuck with me. We finished up, and she left first. I paid and walked out about a minute later, but she was already gone. I didn't think much of it until the next morning when I found an envelope stuck under my windshield wiper. My car was parked outside of my building, and the envelope had my name on it, spelled correctly. Inside was a Polaroid photo of me sitting in that diner the night before. It wasn't taken from our table. It looked like it was shot from outside, through the window. On the back, there was a note that said, "No cameras, remember." I texted her asking what the hell that was about, but the message didn't deliver. She'd already deleted her account. A week went by before I heard anything else. I was walking to my car one morning when I noticed someone standing across the street wearing the same black hoodie. I couldn't tell if it was her, but whoever it was didn't move when I looked over. Just stood there, hands in pockets. I got in my car fast and left. That night, I got another envelope on my windshield. This time it had two photos, one of me unlocking my car that morning and one of my building door. The same handwriting on the back said, "Stop going places with cameras." That was when I went to the police. I showed them the photos and explained everything. They said they couldn't do much since there were no direct threats. They told me to install cameras near my parking spot. The irony of that wasn't lost on me. A few days later, I did put up a camera just to feel safer. But after the first night, when I checked the footage, all I saw was static for a few minutes between 2 and 3 a.m. when the feed came back. The camera angle had been moved slightly downward. Someone had touched it. The next morning, there was a note taped to my door that said, "You're not listening." I barely slept after that. I parked my car in different places, took different routes to work, even stayed at a friend's for a few nights. But the envelopes kept showing up. One had a photo of my office building. Another had a picture of me getting groceries. Always from a distance, always somewhere without visible cameras nearby. The last one was different. It wasn't a photo. It was a small black USB drive. I didn't want to plug it in, but curiosity got the better of me. There was one file on it, a video. It was grainy and dark, but it showed me sitting at the diner with her. The camera slowly zoomed in until it focused on my face. Then the video glitched, and when it came back, it was footage of me walking into my own building days later. At the end, the screen went black, and her voice said, "You're part of it now." I unplugged it and threw it in the trash, but that didn't stop anything. Now, every few weeks, a new envelope shows up. No return address, no markings, just more photos of me in random spots. Sometimes I can't even figure out where they were taken. Always from the same distance, always from the same angle, like she's still there, standing just out of sight. I haven't used a dating app since. I even sold my car and moved. But 2 nights ago, when I was closing my blinds, I noticed a flash of movement across the street, a figure in a hoodie standing perfectly still. In her hand, I could see the faint glint of a camera lens. Owen wasn't my usual type, but he messaged me at the right time. It was a Friday night, I was bored, and his profile seemed normal enough. He worked in hospitality, liked cooking, and said he appreciated confidence without arrogance. His messages were short but polite, and when he asked if I wanted to grab dinner the next day, I said yes without overthinking. He suggested a restaurant he said was his favorite, some quiet Italian place tucked between a laundromat and a florist. I hadn't heard of it before, but the reviews online looked decent. When I showed up, the place was busier than I expected. It had that cozy lighting that made everyone look better than they did in daylight. I texted him that I'd arrived, and a minute later, a man in a crisp white shirt came over to my table. I thought he was a waiter at first, but then he smiled and said my name. It was Owen. He looked older than his photos, but still decent. Calm face, steady eye contact, the kind of guy who made you think he had things figured out. The first thing that threw me off was how he didn't order food. He said he'd already eaten, but wanted to make sure I liked the place. I figured maybe he was watching his diet or something, so I didn't push it. I ordered pasta, and he just sipped water while asking me questions. Not casual questions, either really specific ones, like how often I eat out, whether I usually go back to places I like, or if I'd ever dated someone in the service industry. He watched the staff more than he watched me. Every time one of the waiters passed by, his eyes would follow them for a second before going back to the conversation. I noticed him nod slightly when one of them dropped off our drinks, like they'd exchanged some kind of signal. Halfway through, one of the waitresses stopped by and smiled at me. She said she liked my dress, but before I could respond, Owen interrupted and said, she should be focusing on table 12. The waitress froze for a second, mumbled an apology, and walked off. I left awkwardly, thinking he was joking, but his face stayed serious. He started telling me about how he didn't trust dating apps. He said people lied too easily online. I asked why he used them then, and he said he liked observing how people acted when they didn't know they were being watched. I thought he meant in a general sense until he said he'd been on dates in that same restaurant before. I asked if the staff ever said anything about it, and he smiled like I'd just hit on something he wanted me to ask. He said that's actually the point. Then he leaned forward and said he worked there. Not just as a waiter or bartender, he was the general manager. At first, I thought he was bragging, but then he explained that he set up the match himself. He said he'd noticed one of his waiters flirting too much with female customers, and he wanted to see how far it went. He used a dating app to invite women to the restaurant and would watch how his staff behaved around them. He said I was part of that test. It didn't sound real at first. I actually laughed and told him that was insane. But he kept talking like it was the most normal thing in the world. He said he'd matched with multiple women for this reason and kept detailed notes afterward. He said I'd done well so far because the staff hadn't broken any rules since I arrived. My appetite vanished instantly. I told him that was manipulative and creepy, and he just shrugged. He said everyone had their reasons for dating, and his just happened to involve quality control. I stood up, said I was leaving, and he didn't stop me. He just said, I'll walk you out. As we passed through the restaurant, I noticed some of the staff giving him side glances. A couple of them looked nervous. One girl near the bar kept her head down completely. When I got outside, I told him not to contact me again. He smiled and said, Don't worry, I won't. You weren't really the subject anyway. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 days later, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of me sitting at that restaurant. The photo was taken from the kitchen door, as someone had leaned out to snap it. The caption said, Thank you for helping with the trial run. I blocked the number and deleted the app right away. A week later, I got another message from a different number. This time, it was a video. It showed Owen standing in what looked like the restaurant's back office, talking to someone off camera. He was saying my name, listing details about the date, and explaining that he thought I'd handled the test environment well. At the end, he looked straight into the camera and said, She won't talk. She didn't even notice. I went to the police with the screenshots and video, but they said unless he threatened me or posted anything public, it was a civil issue. They told me to stop engaging. So I tried to forget about it. But then weird things started happening. Every restaurant confirmation email I got, no matter where I booked, had an extra note attached to the bottom that said, Reservation verified by management. I started paying attention, and every single one of those restaurants was part of the same chain as his. He worked for the company that owned all of them. A few weeks later, one of my coworkers told me someone had called her pretending to be from a hospitality review board, asking questions about me. They asked where I usually ate lunch, if I'd mentioned any restaurants recently, and whether I preferred the staff friendly or quiet. I changed my number after that. It didn't stop him. One morning, I woke up to find an envelope slid under my door. Inside was a printed bill from that same restaurant. My order was circled, and under it, someone had written, "You were the calmest one yet." The last thing I ever heard from him was an email sent from a company address tied to the restaurant group. It said, "Our team appreciates your cooperation. The experiment is now closed." I moved soon after. I don't eat out much anymore. But every time I pass by a restaurant and see a manager standing near the entrance, checking the tables, I always look twice, just in case he's still running another test. Kara's profile was weird in a way that made me curious. Every picture looked slightly off, like she'd edited herself next to random objects that didn't match the background. In one, she was standing in front of a mountain, but the lighting was different on her face. Another showed her sitting on a couch that looked like it had been copied and pasted in. Her bio said, "I attract what I deserve." I should have taken that as a warning. We matched on a Sunday night, and she messaged first. She didn't ask anything normal like, "How's your weekend?" Instead, she said, "You look like someone I manifested." I thought she was joking, but she sent a long message explaining how she made vision boards every month to pull people and things into alignment. It sounded new agey, but harmless. I figured she was just one of those spiritual types who burned sage and posted quotes about energy. She suggested we meet at a botanical cafe she liked, somewhere quiet, full of plants and sunlight. When I got there, she was already sitting near the back, surrounded by vines and fake candles. She looked normal enough in person, but the first thing I noticed was her phone. It was propped up on a small stand facing me, recording. She said it was just for her content memories. We ordered drinks, and right away she started taking photos. Not of the food, but of me. I thought maybe she was just taking a candid or two, but she didn't stop. She'd lean over the table, tilt her phone, zoom in, and quietly mutter things like, "Perfect lighting," or "This fits the theme." Every few minutes, she'd review the photos, nod to herself, and then take more. I tried to joke about it, saying she should at least let me see one before she posted it, but she said they weren't for posting. She said she was adding me to her manifestation board. I had no idea what that meant. She said she used photos of people she felt aligned with to attract their energy. She said she'd been manifesting someone like me for months. At first, I thought she was messing around. But when I asked how many people were on her board, she said not many. Then she smiled and said, "Some didn't stay aligned long." She kept her phone pointed at me the whole time, snapping photos while pretending to listen. Whenever I moved, she'd adjust her angle like she was a photographer. At one point, she even stood up and walked around the table to take a side photo of my face. I told her that was a bit much, and she said she needed different perspectives for balance. After about an hour, she took out a small notebook and started writing. She didn't even explain, just started jotting things down while staring at me. When I asked what she was doing, she said she liked to know the traits she wanted to amplify. She showed me the page. It had my name at the top and a list underneath. Calm eyes, trustworthy voice, protective energy, loyal aura. That's when I decided to leave. I told her I had somewhere to be. She didn't seem upset, just said she'd message me later. That night, she did. She sent a collage of photos, me at the cafe, cut out and pasted next to her in different settings. One of them was us sitting on a couch together, but I wasn't even in that picture earlier. She'd taken my face from one of the cafe shots and edited it in beside her. Another showed me holding her hand at a sunset that clearly wasn't real. She said she was manifesting our next few dates. I blocked her right away. A few days later, my phone started glitching. Random photos from that cafe started appearing in my camera roll ones I hadn't taken. Some were even angles I'd never seen before, like from behind me or from across the room. One was a close-up of my hands on the table. I checked the photo details. They were all dated the day of our date, but had been added recently. I didn't know how they got there. Then came the texts, new number. She said blocking her disrupted the energy flow and that she had to rebalance it. She sent me another photo collage, but this time it wasn't just us. It was me, my friends, my flat, my dog, all pulled from my social media somehow and arranged around her in a circle like she'd built a shrine. She said she'd been meditating with my image every night and that she was starting to feel connected. I ignored it, but she kept messaging. She said she made a physical manifestation board now and that she included my presence in her space. The next week, Things started disappearing from my flat. Small things, my lighter, a pair of sunglasses, a notebook. I thought I was just losing them until I got a picture from her new number. It was my lighter sitting on a white table surrounded by candles and photos of me. She said she'd collected physical anchors. I went straight to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without proof she broke in. They told me to change my locks and keep my phone private. I deleted everything, social media, dating apps, even changed my number. For a while, it was quiet. Then one night, I came home and found something on my door. A printed photo of me sleeping. My blinds were half open, and the picture was taken from outside. On the back, she'd written, "The energy is still alive." I moved out a week later. About a month after that, one of my coworkers sent me a TikTok and said it looked familiar. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. It was Kara. She was standing in front of a huge corkboard covered in photos. Dozens of faces, all men, some smiling, some sleeping, some clearly unaware the photo was being taken. In the corner, half hidden, was me. She was talking about how she manifested love through consistency and how she kept their energy safe until it returned. I reported the account, but it got taken down before anything happened. Probably her doing. A few weeks later, I got a letter at my new place. No name, no address, just a single sheet of paper inside. It said, "The universe isn't done yet." Underneath, taped to the page, was another photo, me walking to work, taken from behind. I don't know how she keeps finding me, but every so often I get new photos in my inbox. Always printed, never digital. Always me. I matched with Dylan on a dating app I barely used. He didn't have many photos, just two, both taken in what looked like the same room. Plain walls, dark furniture, bad lighting. His bio said he preferred quiet people who didn't live online. I thought he meant introverts, which sounded fine to me since I wasn't much of a poster anyway. From the start, he was different. He didn't use emojis or send random photos like everyone else. His texts were clean, short, and direct. He asked questions that made me think, what my routines were, how often I went out, if I had close friends nearby. It didn't feel like flirting. It felt like an interview. Still, he was polite, and there was something about his calm tone that made him sound mature. We met after a week of talking. He chose the place, a small independent cafe on the edge of town. I remember walking in and spotting him instantly. He was already sitting posture straight, staring at his phone, but not scrolling. When I sat down, he looked up and smiled in this slow, practiced way, like he'd been rehearsing. He wasn't bad looking. Tall, tidy, soft-spoken. He complimented my outfit, then immediately asked if I had social media. I said not really, just Instagram, but I barely used it. His face lit up. He said he preferred people like that because it keeps things simple. He said most people overshare online and it ruins the mystery. The date itself was okay, a bit stiff. He didn't laugh much, and when he did, it felt forced. He asked strange questions, like who my phone plan was with and whether my apartment had a camera buzzer or just an intercom. When I said intercom, he smiled again, said he liked old-fashioned setups. I brushed it off. Some people are just awkward. The next morning, he texted asking if I wanted to meet again that evening. I hesitated, but he said he already booked a table for us at an Italian restaurant near his place. I agreed because, honestly, he hadn't done anything wrong. At dinner, he was more relaxed, almost too comfortable. He talked a lot more, mostly about control. Not in a creepy way at first, just philosophical. He said social media ruined people's ability to connect because it gave them too much freedom to escape reality. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. He said he liked dating people who didn't have social media because it keeps them controllable. He said it so casually between bites of pasta like it was a normal preference. When I asked what he meant, he said it was easier to build real bonds when there weren't outside distractions. He said the internet made people too accessible, and he preferred relationships that stay inside their own world. I laughed nervously, trying to change the topic, but he wasn't joking. He said he once dated someone who deleted everything for him, and it was the best connection he'd ever had. I tried to downplay it and said I wasn't planning to delete anything, and he just nodded like he'd already factored that in. When I got home, I decided I was done, but then I got a text from him, just 2 words, "Made it home." I ignored it. A few minutes later, another message came, "I like your street." It's quiet. I froze. I hadn't told him where I lived. I checked our messages. Nothing about my address or even what part of town I was in. The only clue he might have had was the train station I mentioned. I asked how he knew that, and he replied, "Lucky guess." I blocked his number that night. 2 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I didn't answer it, but then I got a text from it. "You blocked the wrong number." That was when I realized he must have had more than one phone. I turned off my phone completely for a while, but that made me even more paranoid. Then weird things started happening around my building. My buzzer would go off at random hours, and when I answered, there'd be silence. Once, I caught a glimpse of a shadow walking away from the entrance when I looked out the window. A few days later, I found an envelope under my door. Inside was a printed screenshot of my Instagram profile. It had been deleted. Someone had gone in, wiped every post, and then logged out. I hadn't done it. The account was still active, just empty. That same night, I got another text, this time from a new number. It said, "You're cleaner now. It's better this way." I went straight to the police. They said it sounded like harassment, but that it would be hard to prove unless he directly threatened me. They told me to keep records and avoid contact. I deleted all my accounts after that, not because he told me to, but because I didn't want him to have anything to watch. I even changed my number, but a week later I came home and noticed something off. My apartment door wasn't fully shut. Nothing was missing inside, but my laptop was open on the table and the camera light was on. I unplugged it immediately and checked my Wi-Fi router. Someone had renamed the network. It used to be BT Home Hub. Now it said Offline World. That name haunted me. I moved out a month later, but even after changing everything, new phone, new address, new job, there were still traces. A new Instagram I made for work got followed by an empty account named Still No Posts. I deleted it within minutes, but it reappeared with a new username the next day. Then out of nowhere, I got an email from an address that looked random, like a mix of letters and numbers. The subject line said, "Progress made." Inside, there was only one line of text. People without social media are easiest to keep track of. That was 3 months ago. I haven't seen him since, but I don't use dating apps anymore. Sometimes, though, when I get home late and turn on my phone, I notice it glitching for a second, like something sensing in the background. And once, when I walked past my building's gate, I saw a faint sticker on the wall. It said, "Stay offline. Stay controllable." Tara's profile wasn't flashy. Just 4 photos and a short bio that said, "I like people who overshare." It caught my attention because it was honest, almost too honest. Most people put fake deep quotes for list hobbies they don't even do. She just seemed real. She looked like the kind of person who stayed up till 3 a.m. talking about weird internet theories and old songs no one remembered. We started chatting, and she was funny, sarcastic, quick, but also strangely observant. She'd say things like, "You pause before typing longer messages," or "You use emojis when you feel awkward." It wasn't creepy at first, just accurate, like she was good at reading people. She asked questions about small habits, how I text, how often I check my phone, how I feel about ghosting. She said she found it all interesting. After a few days, she suggested meeting at this vintage bar she liked, the kind that plays soft music and serves cocktails with ingredients you can't pronounce. She said she'd already booked a table and even sent me a Google Maps pin. When I got there, she was already waiting, sipping from a glass with a lime slice floating in it. She looked exactly like her photos, maybe even better. Blonde hair tied back loosely, eyes that made you feel like you were being studied, not admired. When I sat down, she smiled but didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just watched me. Then she said she liked seeing people in person after chatting online because you can compare the version they post to the one that shows up. At first, I thought she just meant dating can be different from texting. But then she said she liked taking notes on people. Real notes. I laughed, thinking she was joking, until she pulled a small notebook from her bag. It had writing all over it. Dates, times, initials. I saw my initials next to the date we first matched. I asked what she was doing, and she said she was collecting data for research. She said she ran an anonymous Reddit account where she posted about her dating app matches. Not in a mean way, according to her, but to analyze digital courtship patterns. She said she posted screenshots of conversations, rating how genuine people were, and asked users to comment on behavioral red flags. I didn't know what to say. My first thought was that she was trolling me, trying to get a reaction. But she kept talking casually, explaining that her posts always blew up. Thousands of people apparently read her threads. She said one post about a guy who used too many question marks got over 18,000 upvotes. She said she'd already posted about me once. That made my stomach drop. She said she didn't use real names, just screenshots cropped to remove details. But still, I couldn't stop thinking about what she might have shared, my messages, jokes, maybe even photos. She said people online had been interested in me, calling me the grounded one. She smiled like she was proud of that. I told her it was messed up to post private chats like that, but she didn't flinch. She said no one cared about privacy online anymore, and that I should be grateful my messages got positive engagement. The rest of the date felt strange. She kept glancing at her phone, probably taking notes, maybe recording. Once, when I leaned in to ask something, I noticed the reflection on her screen. It looked like a recording app was running. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to leave. When the bill came, she paid before I could stop her. Then she asked if I wanted to be part of her follow-up phase. I said I didn't know what that meant, and she said it involved testing reactions in real life. That was when I decided there wouldn't be a second date. That night, I checked Reddit. I searched dating research and Terra. It took a while, but eventually I found a thread titled The Psychology of Modern Flakes, Part 27. It was her. Same writing style, same tone. And in one of the comments, someone had uploaded screenshots of messages that looked way too familiar. My messages. She'd blurred my name, but the timestamps, the wording, it was all there. One of her captions read, "Subject seems stable but unaware of emotional cues. Predicting withdrawal within 48 hours." She was literally predicting my behavior for strangers online. I scrolled further and saw she'd been posting for months. Each subject was labeled like a case file, as 01, as 02, as 03. She described where they lived, what they wore, even how they spoke. She'd uploaded photos from their social media too. One guy had commented saying he thought one of her subjects was him. She replied, "If you think it's you, it probably is." The next day, I blocked her. She didn't message me again, which was a relief. But a few nights later, one of my friends sent me a Reddit link asking if I was in it. I opened it and felt my stomach twist. It was a new post titled Subject S30, Avoidance Tactics in Real Time. There were screenshots of our text exchange from the day I blocked her, with captions describing me as emotionally reactive and predictably defensive. She wrote that I'd fulfilled the projection within schedule. People in the comments were debating whether I'd overreacted or if she pushed too far. They were literally discussing me like an experiment. I made an account just to report it, but the post stayed up. It got hundreds of upvotes overnight. Then someone commented with a photo of me from my Instagram. It wasn't even public. Someone had to have found it through her. The next day, I got an email from an unknown address. It just said, "Your case was well received." Then another one with a link to a spreadsheet titled Subject Data. I clicked it once before realizing what it was, a long list of names, usernames, and links to posts. Most of them were guys. The last entry was me, labeled S30. Next to my name, in bold, it said, "Pending update." I deleted my Reddit account and reported everything again, but nothing happened. The posts disappeared after a few days, but then new ones showed up under different usernames. She was reposting the same content across multiple threads. I tried messaging Reddit admins, but they said, unless there were threats, it didn't violate their policy. It's been months now, but every once in a while, someone still finds me through those threads. Random accounts message me saying they recognize me from Reddit. Last week, I got an email from a completely new address. No text, just a file attached. It was a folder of screenshots, my messages, my Instagram, and a photo of me sitting at that same bar we met at. The last image was a typed note that said, "S30 follow-up complete. Results consistent." I don't go on dating apps anymore, but somehow, every few weeks when I search my name on Reddit, there's always a new post somewhere that mentions the calm one who noticed too late. I matched with Ben on Hinge after he commented on one of my answers about mental health. I'd written something about how I struggled with anxiety but was learning to manage it and he sent this long message saying how much he respected people who were honest about that stuff. It felt thoughtful, like he actually cared. Most people either ignored that part of my profile or made it awkward, so I was glad someone understood. He seemed normal at first, casual job in tech, like hiking, big on mindfulness. He texted often but not in a clingy way, and when I told him I sometimes needed time to myself, he said I was fine. I remember thinking, finally, someone who gets it. Our first date was at a small cafe. He showed up early and already had a drink waiting for me. He said he didn't want to make me nervous by keeping me waiting. I didn't even think twice about it. He was charming in a quiet way, like he studied how to make people feel at ease. He kept his voice soft, his body language open, and somehow made me feel like he could read my thoughts before I said them. By the end of the night, I was comfortable around him, which was rare for me. He asked to see me again the next day, and even though I usually take space after meeting someone new, I said yes. Our second date was at his place. He said he wanted to cook. His flat was spotless, almost too spotless. There was nothing personal anywhere. No photos, no clutter, no mess. Just blank walls and folded towels like it was staged for a rental listing. He cooked perfectly. I remember thinking it was weird how everything about him was perfect. The meal, the timing, even the playlist. He watched me eat more than he ate himself. When I said I was full, he smiled and said, "That's good. I like people who don't try to impress." That night, when we sat on the couch, he started asking about my anxiety. Not in a caring way, more like an interview. He asked when it started, what triggered it, if I ever panicked around people. I answered because I thought he was trying to understand me. And he asked what I usually did when I felt anxious, and I said I sometimes needed reassurance or space depending on the situation. He nodded like he was taking mental notes. After that, he started texting me constantly. At first I liked it, but then it got overwhelming. If I didn't reply within an hour, he'd send another message, then another. Then he'd call and say he just wanted to check I was okay. When I told him I was busy, he'd apologize, then call again the next morning saying he couldn't sleep knowing I might have been upset. It started feeling like a job, keeping him reassured that I was okay so he'd stay calm. But the way he phrased things made me second-guess myself. He'd say stuff like, "You don't have to hide from me," or "I understand your anxiety better than anyone else ever could." The first time I tried to cancel a plan, he didn't get angry. He just said he was worried this might be avoidance behavior, like he was my therapist or something. He said if I wanted to feel better, I shouldn't run from consistency. I told him I needed space for a few days. He said he respected that. But that same night, I got a delivery, flowers, no note. The next day, another delivery, tea, and a card that said, "Calm." Then another one the day after, a book about managing panic attacks. It would have been sweet if it didn't feel so calculated. When I didn't respond, he started showing up at places I went. The park near my flat, the coffee shop by my office. Once, I caught him sitting in his car parked across the street when I came home. He said he was passing by and wanted to make sure I got home safe. The scariest part was how calm he always was. He never yelled, never acted outwardly aggressive. He'd just smile and say he was trying to help. One night he told me completely straight-faced that he liked dating people with anxiety because they don't leave easily. I froze. He said it like it was a compliment, like he'd said it 100 times before. I didn't even respond. I just left. After that, things escalated. He started messaging me from random numbers whenever I blocked him. Always polite, always calm. One text said, "I understand you need space, but please don't push away someone who understands you better than anyone else." Another said, "You'll regret confusing comfort with danger." I stopped going out for a while because I kept feeling watched. Then one day, I came home and noticed something taped to my door. It was a note written on a scrap of paper. "Don't worry. I know what you need." I reported it, but since he hadn't technically threatened me, the police couldn't do much. They told me to block him again and keep my locks secure. A week later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. It had no message, just an attachment. It was a screenshot of a conversation I had with my friend about my anxiety from months before I even met him. Somehow he found old messages from my social media DMs that weren't even public. He redacted my friend's name and highlighted phrases like, "I overthink everything, and sometimes I just need someone to tell me it's okay." Then came another email. This one had photos. All of them were me, leaving work, walking the dog, getting groceries. The last one was taken inside my building lobby. He must have followed me in at some point. I moved out 2 weeks later. I changed my number, deleted my social media, and told everyone not to give out my new details. For a while, things were quiet. Then one morning, I got a letter at my new address. No sender. Inside was a single page with one line written across it. You always needed someone who wouldn't leave. It wasn't signed, but I didn't have to guess who it was from. It's been months, but I still double-check every lock before I go to bed. Sometimes when I wake up at night, I swear I can hear a phone vibrating somewhere outside my door, like a call that never stops ringing. I matched with Holly on Bumble late one night when I was half scrolling, half pretending to care about finding something real. Her profile stood out because she looked like someone who had their life perfectly sorted. Every photo was clean, like it belonged on a brand campaign. She had a thing for minimalism, apparently. White walls, black outfits, calm poses. Her bio just said, "Only real people, please." I thought that was fair. I'd met enough fake ones. We messaged for a few days and she was sharp. Funny too, but always asking questions that felt like they had a purpose. What kind of car do you drive? Where do you work exactly? What time do you usually finish? It didn't feel flirty. It felt like she was collecting information. I joked about it once, but she said she liked to know who she was talking to before investing time. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's cautious online now. She suggested dinner at this quiet Thai place just outside the city. She picked it, made the reservation, even sent me the Google Maps link. When I got there, she was already sitting at the table facing the door, like she'd been waiting for me to arrive so she could size me up. She looked exactly like her pictures. Straight brown hair, neat black turtleneck, everything calculated. Before we even ordered, she leaned forward and said she needed to see my ID. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't smile. She said she always verifies who she's meeting for safety reasons. I hesitated, but she said she'd show hers too, which she did. Driver's license. Perfectly clean. I figured maybe she'd been catfished before, so I handed mine over. She took a photo of it with her phone before I could stop her. She said it was just a cross-check. I told her that was weird, but she brushed it off and started talking about food like nothing happened. We ordered, and the rest of the night was actually fine. She was easy to talk to, even if her tone stayed a bit formal. No big laughs, no awkward silences either. When the bill came, she offered to split it exactly in half, counting the coins to the cent. Then she said she'd text me when she got home. She did, around midnight. Said she enjoyed it and wanted to see me again. I said sure. She didn't reply after that. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my neighbor, an older woman named Denise. She said some girl had come to her door asking questions about me. At first, I thought it was a prank, but Denise described her perfectly. Black turtleneck, polite but off. Apparently, Holly had knocked and said she was my girlfriend and was doing a background check. She asked how long I'd lived there, what kind of hours I kept, even if I ever brought other women home. Denise said she told her to leave and then call me right after. I didn't even know how she got my address until it hit me, my ID. She'd taken a picture of it. I went back through our messages to see if I'd ever mentioned where I live. I hadn't. The only way she could have known was from that photo. I texted her asking what she thought she was doing. She read the message but didn't reply. Then she blocked me. I figured that was that. Creepy, yeah, but over. But 2 days later, I noticed someone had been outside of my flat building around the same time every night. I don't know if it was her because they always wore a hoodie, but the figure stood by the lamppost across the street and didn't move. Sometimes, when I looked out from my window, I could see the faint glow of a phone screen lighting up their face. Once, I swear I saw the flash of a camera. The next morning, my neighbor texted again saying Holly had come back. She didn't knock this time. She was just standing outside, watching the building. When Denise went out to confront her, Holly smiled and said she was just checking something. I'd reported it to the building manager, but by the time anyone checked the cameras, the footage had been wiped. The manager said the system had malfunctioned, which never happens. A week passed without anything. Then one morning when I went to leave for work, there was a letter on my doorstep. No stamp, no address, just my name printed neatly in black ink. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my own photo ID printed on it, but not the original picture. The photo had been replaced with one of me from the restaurant that night. Same pose, same angle. She must have taken it while pretending to take a picture of her food or something. I threw it out and tried to forget it. 2 nights later, I got a text from an unknown number saying, "I like your building. It suits you." I didn't reply. Then another one came. "Denise is kind." Then another. "You should thank her for not lying." I blocked the number, but a new one messaged almost immediately after. "You shouldn't have deleted our record." Attached was a photo. Me walking to work that morning. She was following me. I went to the police, showed them the messages, but they said since there was no threat, they couldn't do much besides file a report. They told me to block any new numbers and avoid contact. The next few days were quiet. I started checking over my shoulder every time I left the flat. I even covered my door camera with tape. One evening, Denise knocked on my door, holding her phone. She said she got another text from Holly. It said, "He doesn't know how lucky he is to be watched." I didn't even know how to react. That night, around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow, steady, deliberate. I froze. The sound stopped right in front of my flat. Then I heard a quiet knock. Not loud, just 2 soft taps. I didn't move. The peephole was covered, but I could see a shadow under the door. It stayed there for maybe a full minute before walking away. In the morning, there was another letter. Same neat handwriting. This one said, "You passed." That's it. Just those 2 words. I haven't heard from her since. No more texts, no more letters. But sometimes when I check my mail, I find envelopes that look like hers. Same handwriting, but when I open them, they're empty. I changed my number, deleted all my dating apps, and moved after that. But the first week in my new place, I got a message on WhatsApp from a new number. No name, no profile picture. It said, "You didn't need to move. I already updated the address." The first time I met Ethan, I thought he was one of those quiet, put-together guys who just didn't know how to flirt properly. He worked in finance, spoke softly, and always looked too neat for casual settings. Shirt tucked in, watch aligned perfectly, hair trimmed like he had a standing appointment every week. We met on Hinge after he liked one of my pictures of my dog. He said he appreciated responsibility, which I didn't really give a reply anyway. Our first date was fine. Coffee, a walk, standard small talk. He wasn't weird, just overly polite. He thanked the barista twice, complimented an old couple nearby, and asked if I wanted to do this again at my earliest convenience. It was awkward but harmless. So when he texted 2 days later asking if I wanted dinner, I said yes. I figured he was just formal. We planned to meet at a quiet Italian restaurant halfway between our places. He texted the location, time, and said, "My mother will join us briefly." I thought it was a typo. When I asked what he meant, he said, "She always meets the girls I invest time in." I thought he was joking, so I laughed it off and didn't ask more. When I got there, I immediately saw him. He was sitting at a corner table facing the door, but he wasn't alone. Across from him was a woman who looked exactly like an older version of him. Same eyes, same sharp posture. She was wearing a long beige coat and had a leather notebook open in front of her. Ethan waved like nothing was strange. I hesitated but sat down anyway because walking out felt dramatic. He introduced her as Mom like we were in a school meeting. She reached out to shake my hand and said she'd heard a lot about me. I'd only known him a week, so that already didn't make sense. She asked me about my job, my family, where I live, even how many relationships I'd had. She spoke calmly, like she was reading from a questionnaire. Ethan just sat there smiling, occasionally writing things in his phone. Every time I answered, she'd nod and write something down in her notebook. When the waiter came to take our order, Ethan ordered for all 3 of us without asking what I wanted. He said I looked like someone who'd enjoy simple food. His mom smiled and said she agreed. The whole thing felt rehearsed, like they practiced this dynamic before. Halfway through the meal, his mom asked how long I saw myself staying in the city. When I said I wasn't sure, she said commitment issues often start with geographic indecision. Ethan nodded like it was a medical fact. I tried to laugh it off, but they weren't joking. Then she asked how old my parents were and if they were still married. When I told her they were divorced, she made a note in her book again. I started to realize she wasn't just being nosy. She was documenting me. When she excused herself to go to the bathroom, I told Ethan that this was way too weird. He didn't react much, just said she liked to assess compatibility because he'd made bad investments before. I asked if he meant relationships, and he said yes, exactly. Then he added that she'd been right every time one didn't work out. She came back a few minutes later and said she needed to take some photos of us for reference. Before I could say anything, she pulled out a disposable camera and snapped a few pictures across the table. The flash went off right in my face. She said she liked film because it doesn't lie. I barely ate after that. When the bill came, she insisted on paying. She said she didn't want me thinking Ethan was the type to throw money around just to impress. I thanked her out of politeness, and she wrote something else down before putting her notebook away. When we left the restaurant, I expected Ethan to say goodbye and go home. Instead, he asked if I wanted to come back to his place for tea. I said no. He looked genuinely surprised and said his mom would be disappointed. That was the moment I decided to end it completely. I told him I wasn't interested and walked off. He didn't follow. The next morning, I woke up to an email from an unknown address. It was titled, "Thank you for your time." Inside was a scanned page from his mom's notebook. My name was written at the top, followed by a list of bullet points. It said things like pleasant enough, potential trust issues, mild defensiveness, financial stability, unknown. The last line said, not recommended for long-term consideration. I blocked the address immediately, but later that day, I got another email, this time from Ethan. He said he was disappointed in the evaluation, but that he wanted to prove her wrong. I ignored it. He sent another one that night, saying he'd like to continue independently. When I didn't reply, he texted me saying his mom was upset and wanted closure. Over the next few days, I started noticing weird things. A car parked outside my flat every evening. Same silver sedan, same tinted windows. Once, I saw a woman who looked just like his mom sitting inside, writing in something. I convinced myself I was imagining it until a note showed up under my door. It said, "I'd like to reassess in person." Thursday, 7 p.m., there was no name, but the handwriting matched the notes from that scanned page. I didn't go anywhere near home that night. I stayed at my friend's place. When I came back the next morning, there was another note waiting on the floor. This one just said, "Missed appointment. Regret noted." I went to the police, but they said unless there was a threat or break-in, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I keep records of everything and avoid contact. For a while, nothing happened. Then, about 3 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't handwritten this time. It was printed on paper with a letterhead that said, "Family Compatibility Evaluation." It had a formal structure like an actual report. Under my name, it said, "Final Assessment, Unsuitable Candidate." It even had a fake signature at the bottom that read, "Dr. L. Harper." I threw it away, locked every possible email he could use, and deleted all my dating apps. It's been months now, and I still get letters sometimes. Always plain envelopes, always typed. The most recent one just said, "Progress report pending. Do not date elsewhere until completion." I don't know where they get my new addresses from, but they always find me. I met Maya on a random Tuesday night after deleting and reinstalling Tinder for the 10th time that month. Her profile looked normal enough, simple pictures, not over-filtered captions that seemed chill. She worked in real estate, apparently. Her bio said, "Don't waste my time, I know my worth," which made her sound confident, and I respected that. At first. We matched almost instantly, and she messaged me within minutes. She wasn't flirty, more direct than anything. She asked where I worked, what car I drove, and if I'd live alone. It was weird, but I thought she was just being upfront. Most people dance around questions, so I found her honesty refreshing. She told me she was tired of broke guys pretending they were ambitious. I laughed it off, said I was doing fine for myself, and we agreed to meet at his upscale burger place downtown that Friday. She showed up 20 minutes late wearing sunglasses inside and holding her phone like it was part of her outfit. She didn't even apologize, just sat down, glanced around the restaurant, and said the lighting was too yellow. I should have left right there, but she was beautiful. The type that made you second-guess yourself just by smiling. The waitress came over, handed us menus, and Maya didn't even touch hers. She looked straight at me and said she doesn't order on first dates until she knows the guy's serious. I laughed again because I thought she was joking. But she wasn't. She leaned forward and said she needed proof I wasn't wasting her time. When I asked what she meant, She said she wanted to see my bank balance. At first, I thought I misheard her, but she repeated it word for word, still calm, still staring right through me. She said if I was confident about where I stood financially, I wouldn't have a problem showing her. I told her that was insane, but she didn't move. She said she wasn't ordering until I did. I was half embarrassed, half angry, but something about her tone made it hard to argue. She didn't raise her voice or roll her eyes. She just looked at me like I was an item she was inspecting before buying. To get it over with, I opened my banking app and showed her the screen for a few seconds. She leaned in, her eyes scanning every digit, then smiled slightly and said, "Okay, I'll order." She waved down the waitress like nothing weird had just happened. I sat there in silence while she ordered the most expensive burger on the menu, truffle fries, and a cocktail that cost more than my meal. I ordered water. The rest of the date felt off. She'd go quiet mid-sentence to scroll on her phone, probably messaging someone else. Every time I tried to talk about something normal, she'd steer back to money, mortgages, salaries, designer brands. When I said I wasn't that into luxury stuff, she said, "That's what people say when they can't afford it." I kept telling myself to just finish the night and leave, but then she mentioned she'd already told her friends about me. She said they were waiting nearby to check if I was the real deal. She even tilted her phone to show me a group chat where my Tinder photos were sent. They were rating me. That's when I started feeling cornered. I tried to laugh it off again, but my hands were shaking a bit. She noticed and smiled, saying I was cute when nervous. I wanted to leave so bad, but my food hadn't even come yet. The waitress brought it over, and Maya made me wait until she took pictures for her story, tagging the restaurant like she was some influencer. She barely ate. Halfway through, she asked if I wanted to come with her to a private bar. I said no, I had work early. She said fine, but her tone changed instantly. She started scrolling on her phone again, eyes darting between me and the screen. After a few seconds, she said, "He says you're lying." I asked what she meant, and she said her friend, apparently watching from the other side of the restaurant, thought I looked too nervous to be financially stable. I turned around, and sure enough, there were two girls sitting by the bar who looked like they were trying not to laugh. That was it for me. I got up, told her I was done, and went to pay at the counter. The waitress gave me this weird look and said Maya had already taken care of it. Confused, I turned back and saw her standing near the door, waving at me. She mouthed, "See you soon." That night, I got a notification from my banking app. Someone tried to log in from an unknown device. Then another one. Both failed attempts, but it freaked me out. I changed my password immediately. The next morning, I woke up to a DM on Instagram from Maya. It said, "You shouldn't have lied." I hadn't even told her my last name, so I didn't understand how she found me. She sent a screenshot of my profile picture from a private account I rarely use. I blocked her, but more messages came from other accounts, all with similar usernames like Real Maya or Maya Seen It. They'd send me random screenshots from my banking app, stuff I'd never posted or shared. I don't even know how she got them. I went to the bank, told them what happened, and they said someone had tried to access my account multiple times overnight, but couldn't get past the security questions. I changed everything, passwords, card numbers, even switched banks. But it didn't stop. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, it was silent at first, then a woman's voice whispered, "You shouldn't have wasted my time." The line went dead. I blocked the number, but more calls followed, different numbers every time. Then came the packages. Small envelopes with receipts inside. One was for a meal at the same restaurant we'd gone to, dated the day after our date. The name on it said, Maya Plus Guest. The total was $497. I stopped going out after that. Deleted all my dating apps, even changed my number again. But a few weeks later, while checking my new bank account, I saw a transaction for $1 sent to a name I didn't recognize. The memo said, "Not wasting time now, AMI." I froze. Called the bank. They said it was a direct transfer from an unknown account, not traceable to a full name. I don't know how she keeps finding me. I don't even live in the same place anymore. But every month, like clockwork, I get that same $1 transfer. Always with the same message. Always on the same date we first met. I met Josh on Bumble one random Sunday night when I couldn't sleep. His photos looked pretty normal, nothing flashy, just in a coffee shop, him hiking, and one where he's standing next to some kind of sports car. He had that soft smile that didn't look forced and a calm vibe in his messages that made him easy to talk to. We started texting about stupid stuff like bad movies and late night snacks, and he didn't come across as creepy or desperate. He seemed like one of those chill guys who didn't need to prove anything. After a week, we decided to meet for lunch at this quiet bar-style restaurant near the station. I remember getting there a few minutes early, sitting by the window. When he walked in, he looked exactly like his pictures, or at least I thought he did. The only thing I noticed was that his hair was shorter than in his photos. I even complimented it, and he smiled in a weird way like he was hiding something behind it. The date started fine. He was polite, funny in a dry kind of way, and asked a lot of questions. But something about him felt slightly off, like he was overanalyzing every reaction I had. When I laughed, he'd pause and watch me for a second too long. When I took a sip of my drink, his eyes followed every movement. It wasn't creepy exactly, just strange, like he was collecting data instead of actually being present. Halfway through the meal, he leaned forward and said there was something he needed to be honest about. His voice was calm, steady, not nervous at all, which made what came next even weirder. He told me that the pictures on his profile weren't actually him. They were his twin brothers. He said he'd use them as part of a test to see which of them I'd be more attracted to. I froze for a second because I thought he was joking, but his face was serious. Then he nodded slightly towards the back of the restaurant. I turned and saw two guys sitting a few tables away. One of them looked exactly like him. The same face, same build, just styled a bit differently. The other one must have been a friend or something because he didn't look related. Josh said his twin's name was Luke and that Luke was the one in the photos. He said they'd made a deal. Luke would let him use his pictures for a month, and they'd compare who got better matches. But it wasn't just part of the test. He said they'd both been talking to different people, and when I matched, they apparently decided I was the most interesting one. I didn't even know how to react. I asked him why he'd tell me that in the middle of a date, and he said it was because Luke wanted to see how I'd react. He smiled again when he said it, like it was some kind of prank show. The worst part, both of them were still watching. Every time I glanced over, Luke's eyes were locked on me, not even pretending to look away. It felt like I was part of some weird social experiment that I never agreed to. I told Josh that was messed up and I was leaving, but he didn't move. He just said quietly that they hadn't decided which one of them should keep talking to me yet. That's when I noticed Luke was on his phone, typing something. Seconds later, Josh's phone buzzed, and he looked down and smiled at the screen. Then he looked back up at me and said, "He thinks you like me better." It made my skin crawl. I stood up and said I was done. As I was leaving, Luke stood too. For a second, it looked like he was going to follow me, but Josh shook his head, and Luke sat back down. I walked straight out and didn't look back. That night, I blocked Josh on Bumble and deleted the app for a while. But the next morning, I woke up to a new message request on Instagram from an account named Luke_and_reality. The profile picture was the same one from Josh's dating profile, the one I thought was him. The message said, "I didn't like how you left." I ignored it, but he kept messaging. "He didn't tell you everything. You picked wrong. I want to explain." I blocked the account, but then another one appeared. Josh_reality. That one sent, "We both liked you. It's rare that happens." I blocked that too. A week later, I started getting calls from unknown numbers. When I answered one by accident, it was just breathing for a few seconds before a man's voice said, "You were supposed to pick one." I hung up instantly. I told my friend about it, and she said I should just change my number. So I did. But then, one night when I was at a small cafe with a friend, I saw them again. Both of them. Sitting at a table across from us. Same calm faces, same blank expressions. Josh was on his phone, probably typing something, while Luke just watched me. They didn't say anything. They just sat there for the entire time we were eating. When we left, they left too. Not right behind us, but close enough that I could hear their footsteps. I went home that night with my stomach in knots. I double-checked all the locks and didn't sleep. The next morning, there was a note pushed under my door. It said, "We both decided you'd like me better if you lived with me for a bit. Luke agrees." I called the police, but they didn't have much to go on. No threats, no forced entry. They told me to keep record of everything. So I did, but it didn't stop. Every few days there'd be something. A new account following me. A delivery I never ordered. Once a pizza showed up with a receipt saying, "From both of us." The last thing I got from them was an envelope with 2 photos inside. One was me sitting in the cafe from before. The other was me standing outside my building, taken from across the street. Written on the back was, "We're not testing anymore." I moved a month later and changed everything. Number, socials, even my hair. But sometimes when I go out, I see someone who looks just like Josh in passing. It could be anyone. I'll never know for sure which one I met that day, or if maybe both of them still keep track of me, waiting to see who I'll pick next. I met Amber on Hinge one evening when I was half asleep scrolling through profiles. She looked like the kind of girl everyone would describe as put together. Straight brown hair, clean eyeliner, neat background in every picture, like her life was always organized. Her profile said she worked in HR and loved planning things in advance. That should have been my first clue, but at the time I thought it meant she was responsible. She messaged first, which I liked. Our chats were fine at the start. Normal questions about work, food, and random shows. She typed proper sentences, no emojis, no slang. It was kind of refreshing compared to people who texted like they were in a group chat. She asked to move to WhatsApp after 2 days, and before I could even save her number, she sent me a PDF. It was called Dating Agreement, version 3. At first I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't. It had 6 sections, bullet points, and even a signature line at the bottom. It told me how often I should message her when I should reply, and how many times we should meet before reevaluating compatibility. It said, respond within 30 minutes unless asleep or in work. Minimum 3 text check-ins per day. No ghosting, dry replies, or ignoring without reason. Weekly date or video call required. No social media posts about other women while talking. At the bottom, it had a space for both our names and a digital signature box. She said she made it to avoid confusion and wasted energy. I didn't know what to say. I thought maybe she'd gone through a bad relationship or something, and this was her way of making sure things were clear. I decided to sign it just to move on. I didn't think she'd actually care that much. After that, she was extra sweet for the first week. She'd send me reminders like, "Good morning message due soon," and I'd think she was joking. But one night I replied 2 hours late because I was at football with my mates. She texted me a screenshot of the agreement and circled the line about reply times. She said I had breached the terms. I laughed it off, but she didn't. She said we'd have to have a review call. I thought that was some weird roleplay thing until she FaceTimed me the next day, notebook in hand, literally talking like an office meeting. She went over how I'd underperformed in communication and needed to show more consistency. I remember sitting there, stunned, half amused and half creeped out. I should have edited it then, but she wasn't always weird. In person, she was quiet but funny. On our first date, she picked the restaurant, sent me a map, and told me what time to arrive to avoid unnecessary waiting. She even asked me to send a photo of my outfit before coming so she could coordinate tone. I went along with it because she was attractive, and I thought maybe she was just quirky. Halfway through the meal, she took out her phone and started taking off points on some kind of checklist. I asked what she was doing, and she said she was logging metrics. She explained that it helped her track emotional performance. That night when I got home, she sent me a feedback form, literally a link. It asked questions like, "How did you feel during our date?" and rate communication quality from 1 to 10. I ignored it. The next morning, she texted that I'd missed the deadline and that she'd have to note that. The more I saw her, the more she started showing how strict she could be. Once, she showed up to my flat uninvited because I hadn't replied fast enough. She said she was checking compliance. When I asked how she knew where I live, she said she found my address from a parcel in the background of a photo I'd sent weeks before. That scared me. I told her we should slow things down, but she said that wasn't an option until the contract expired. I laughed nervously, but she didn't blink. She said it had a 90-day term and that termination before review requires both parties' agreement. She wasn't joking. I stopped replying altogether after that. Locked her on WhatsApp, deleted her number, everything. But she emailed me instead, attaching a final notice. It said I was in breach of terms and owed her emotional damages for wasted time. I didn't even know what that meant. I deleted it, thinking she'd get bored. Then I started noticing weird things. Packages would show up at my door with no return label. Inside would be printed copies of our chats, highlighted and annotated like school essays. Some parts had notes like positive emotional response or avoidance detected. One night, someone buzzed my flat's intercom and didn't speak. When I went to the window, there was a figure standing by the lamppost, holding a clipboard. I couldn't see their face, but I swear the posture looked like hers. Upright, stiff, formal. I moved my bed away from the window after that. A few days later, I got an envelope under my door. Inside was another document titled Relationship Audit, Phase 2. It said she decided to extend the agreement because I'd failed to meet review criteria. At the bottom was her signature again, dated that same morning. I went to the police, but they said, unless she threatened me, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to block her and avoid contact. So I changed my number again and deleted every app. But it didn't stop. My new job issued me a work phone a month later, and within a week, she somehow found the number. She texted saying, "Contract auto-renewed. Communication required." I didn't reply, but she started emailing my work address. Every few days, I'd get a report attached with weird charts showing how often I'd texted, how long our dates lasted, and what time I usually slept. I don't even know how she got some of that info. The last thing I ever got from her was a manila envelope left at reception. Inside was a new agreement, this one titled Permanent Commitment Draft. It had 2 lines for signatures, but the second one was already filled out. Mine, the same signature I'd used on the first document. I still don't know how she got it. I moved flats again after that, changed my number, deleted every social account. It's been months now, but sometimes when I log into anything new, I get a verification email. The name on the account always says Amber Edmond. She's still keeping track. I matched with Liam on a random Thursday night when I was half bored, half lonely. His profile looked plain at first. No gym selfies or over-edited filters. Just a guy in his early 30s with messy hair, a black hoodie, and a smile that looked real. He said he liked cooking, hiking, and old horror films, which sounded normal enough. I didn't think much of it when we started talking, but the thing about Liam was how calm he seemed. He didn't try too hard or rush things. He'd send me a picture of his dinner or his dog sleeping on the couch and then vanish for hours. Somehow that made him feel more real than the others who messaged nonstop. We started doing video calls after a week. He always sat in the same dimly lit room with beige walls and an old lamp behind him. I used to tease him that his house looked like a dentist's waiting room, and he'd laugh but never show me around. His voice had that quiet confidence that made you lean closer when he spoke. There was something about the way he listened that made me feel like every word I said mattered. Our first 2 dates were simple. A walk by the canal, then dinner at a little Italian place near his work. He was polite but not stiff. Paid for the meal but didn't make a big deal about it. The second time, he came over to mine. We cooked together and watched a movie. It felt normal, easy. That's what freaked me out later, the fact that nothing about him felt strange until he wanted it to. By the third date, he started acting a bit distant. Not rude, just quieter. I thought maybe work was stressing him out, but when I asked, he said he'd tell me something important soon. I remember thinking it couldn't be that serious. Maybe he had a kid or was moving away or something. But what he told me didn't even cross my mind as possible. He said he was married. Not used to be. Married. Present tense. He said it in the calmest tone, like he was talking about the weather. I froze for a second, waiting for him to follow it up with a joke or something, but he didn't. He just kept staring at me, his face completely straight. Then he added that his wife knew about me, that she was okay with it. I laughed a little at first, thinking he meant some weird open marriage thing, but then he said, she's been in the whole time. I didn't get it until he said she was in the next room during our video calls, that she'd sit behind the wall, quiet, listening to everything we said. I didn't know what to say. My stomach turned because I instantly read every single call in my head, the way he glanced to his right now and then, how sometimes his mic would glitch or I hear faint sounds like breathing. He told me she didn't like to watch, just listen. Said she found it comforting. At that point, I told him he needed to leave, but he didn't move. He just said, "Please don't make this weird. She'll get upset." The way he said it didn't sound like he was protecting me or even her. It sounded like fear. I didn't want to find out what upset meant in his house. He left that night, and I blocked him on everything. But a few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, nobody spoke. Just quiet breathing. I hung up. Then it happened again the next night. This time I didn't answer, but a voicemail popped up. Only it wasn't Liam. It was a woman's voice. Soft, whispery, and calm. She said my name like she'd been practicing it. Then she said, "I heard everything." I deleted the voicemail, but she called again. Each time from a different number. Sometimes I'd pick up just to tell her to stop, but she'd stay silent for a full minute before hanging up. One night I got curious, stupid I know, and called back one of the numbers. A man answered. It wasn't Liam. It sounded older, almost robotic. He said no one named Liam lived there. A week later, a parcel came to my flat. No name on it, just my address. Inside was a photo. It was a screenshot from one of our video calls. The weird thing was, it was in the same angle as my camera. It was like someone had taken it from behind Liam, showing both of us on screen. Behind him, the doorway was open, and in the shadows of the other room, I could make out a blurry figure. A woman. Standing. I threw the photo away and called the police. They said unless there were threats, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to change my number and keep an eye out for any packages. So I changed everything. Number, locks, even moved flats after a month. I thought it was over until a new account popped up on a different dating app. No picture, just the name Laura. The bio said, "We've met before." I read everything. I reported the profile instantly, but before it got taken down, I noticed the profile picture had changed. It was a blurry photo of me taken from my old flat window. I can't prove it was them. The police didn't care since no one had broken in or touched me. But sometimes at night, when I'm scrolling through my phone, I get a FaceTime call from an unknown number. When I answer, it's always dark and no one speaks. The sound is faint, but if I listen closely, I swear I can hear breathing. And once, just once, I thought I heard two people whispering. The man's voice sounded like Liam. The woman's voice sounded like she was right next to him.